And I want to welcome you to the March 10th, 2020 Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for the Village of Ossining. Just remember that this is a public hearing that is quasi-judicial. We ask that no one speaks in the audience. If you must talk or if you need to say something or discuss, please take it outside of the room and down the hall. If you stand outside of these rooms, you will be able to hear your entire conversation. If you talk outside the we will be able to hear your conversation. It kind of comes back into the room. When you come before the board, you must provide your name, your address, and remember that you're addressing the board and not speaking to the applicant or their representative. Applicants and representatives, please remember you are addressing the board. So, with that said, we are ready to get started. First on our agenda is ZBA number 1519, 6 Narragansett Avenue. Is there someone here to speak to that?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Mark Malone, 180 Iroquois Road in Ossining.
I'm Emmanuel Alonso, 6 Narragansett Avenue.
As you know, we've been here a number of times before. We are requesting a front yard area variance to allow Mr. Anjo and his tenants in his two-family house to park in portions of the front yard. Why are we here requesting this variance? Because there's no parking on Narragansett Avenue, and because of the configuration of the house, as you can see here, it juts out into the driveway, allowing only one car to pass. So the configuration of the house on the property creates a problem as far as parking is concerned. I know Mr. Martinez wasn't here last time, so if I could just recap briefly, if you wouldn't mind, just take 2 minutes. Mr. Anjo filed the application for a variance back before the September meeting. When he did that, we also filed a supplemental application, which I hope you all have. That contains basically all of the factors that the ZBA must consider, all the statutory factors, together with the evidence that Mr. Anjo is presenting. There are a number of exhibits attached. I think some of you have looked through those. I think last time you indicated that you had seen those. When we came to the September meeting, there was not much discussion of the factors, but the chairperson had 2 issues. One was she felt that if this was granted, if the front yard variance was granted, it would create a precedent and there would be many more applications. And the second thing was she indicated that she didn't know why Mr. Anjo couldn't park 2 cars in that garage in the back. We filed a second, which I hope you all have as well, a second supplement. The second supplement indicates at least 10 cases since 2008 in which this board has granted front yard parking variances. One of those variances was granted right down the block from Mr. Anjo at 48 Narragansett Avenue. So basically, we think that as far as the argument of creating a precedent, the horse is out of the barn. There's already been precedent granted. There are at least 3 of those cases that we've cited in which not only did they grant the front yard variance, but the village also granted either a lease of property because these people were parking in village property, either a long-term lease or some other arrangement, a license, some other arrangement. So there's at least 3 cases in the last several years. We did, when we did that, we filed a FOIL application, and that's how we got those cases. At the February meeting, there were only 4 members present. 2 of the members indicated that they would vote in favor of the request for the variance. I believe Mr. Griffin indicated that he wanted to review the cases. I just happened to have copies of the cases, and they were provided to him. Since that time, we've had discussions with the building department. As a matter of fact, after the meeting, Mr. Gustinelli came to Mr. Anjo's house, and they had discussions about other options besides the first plan that was presented. Based on that, we came up with another option, which is in essence the plan that you see before you. We basically, when that discussion was arrived at. We went to Mr. Anjo's architect, and he prepared these plans. We then had some discussions with the building department. I, for one, brought some plans, and through Ms. Kane, Mr. Augustinelli indicated that we needed to put the size of the parking spaces on there so that you could see them. He also indicated that we had to contact Mr. Frioli, the village engineer, to make sure that we could get a curb cut. I had discussions about the curb cut. We did those things. Mr. Anjo spoke with Mr. Frioli. We then incorporated the changes that Mr. Augustinelli had requested as far as the size of the parking space was concerned. Mr. Anjo then went back a second time and spoke to Mr. Augustinelli, and as I understand it, the discussion centered around showing the dimensions of the garage. Now, again, the garage was built in the 1900s. It was not made to accommodate modern cars. And Mr. Augustinelli's suggestion, I believe, was that we show the dimensions. Mr. Anjo went back to his architect, and we now show the dimensions, and it shows there, I think, that there's no way that you can park, have a legitimate parking space in that garage. It's just too small. We're back here tonight based on this new plan that we think we've pretty carefully vetted through the village building department. And we're hoping that we'll have a vote tonight and you'll approve the front yard variance as we have indicated in the revised plans.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here from the board that would like to speak or to open?
No, just to add that if it was to be approved, the village engineer didn't actually give the applicant an answer about the curb cut. So I believe if it is going to be approved tonight, it would have to be with the condition to make sure that they can get a curb cut from the Department of Public Works.
My understanding from Mr. Kahan is that's true, that this board has to grant the variance. He's not going to allow a curb cut if we don't get the variance. So it's sort of a chicken and the egg kind of thing. So that's true. It would probably have to be conditioned upon Mr. Frioli agreeing to the curb cut.
Question, Joe, did you speak to Paul about curb cut?
Regardless of whether he spoke to him or not, and I'm going to jump in. I'm going to answer that because in this case, this board has to agree to him getting that space before anything can be done with DPW or.
Okay.
And so
I
that's
understand.
what.
So it doesn't matter.
Right, so that's what.
Got it.
that's what
All
we
right.
are.
So,
Okay.
So just, I guess, just for formality, would have to be just putting the condition that it's granted based on.
Based on.
in the motion.
Of course.
Yes, of course.
I have to recuse myself from voting on this because I did not know that you're not allowed to speak to property owners. And I went with Joe and looked at the property. And although I don't feel that I did anything that wasn't according to Hoyle, as it were, the optics on it require me to recuse myself from this vote in order for the board to be able to protect their objectivity.
All right, if that's the case, then you can't be deliberating any further on this matter.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
So I'm not deliberating.
Okay. And you probably shouldn't be sitting up here right at this point. You can come back after this matter is finished, but you shouldn't be sitting.
Really?
Yes.
Then I will excuse myself. Call me back when that's done. We're gonna
You can
have to
sit-
have a
you can sit
conversation
in the
about
audience.
rules too, because frankly, this is silly. And I like to go on record as saying, this is silly.
Sorry. You can sit in the audience.
Yeah, I can if I want. Call me back when you're ready.
Can I just ask, I don't know that I understand that. The board cannot have discussions with a landowner? That's the legal reason for the recusal?
It's almost like having an ex parte communication. We
Right.
want to avoid that.
Although he went with the building inspector.
But notwithstanding,
Now it's, right.
it wouldn't be appropriate.
So just to clarify with that, what was proposed was that some of the members, this was the first time since they started this year, the beginning of the year, wanted to get acclimated with some of the applications, so it was requested by the chairperson of the board here that I would accompany Mr. Mario to just get him acclimated on what is actually, what they actually were proposing for this application. I guess the issue is that, you know, you can get up to speed with what's going on with the application, but I guess if you're going to take a vote, that there should be no, I guess, interaction with the applicant in discussion about how to propose it to the board for vote. Is that correct?
That is-
Can I just ask something? All politics aside, seriously, all politics aside, where can I put 4 cars on my property? Where? Please tell me. I can't park on top of the roof. They don't fit in the car, they don't, I've showed 2 examples already.
We haven't,
We haven't even
Finish
figured this out.
48 Narragansett is a multifamily house, got granted a bigger curb cut, has 2-car garages, the same thing. They didn't sit here for 3 meetings.
So just to move on, just to let you know about the plan, the fact that they're indicating that the garage doesn't accommodate enough size for the vehicles, and the code says that you have to have 9 feet by 18 feet in length. What I had said to the architect was, as long as, if the garage itself is not being used for parking, propose where you want to make the parking in the rear yard in place of using the garage, and as you see, if you kind of
Right,
slide down that,
it's
they're showing them in
perfect.
front of the garage as
That's
2
correct.
individual spaces. So therefore, I guess you can call it a garage, but if it's not gonna accommodate actual vehicles to be parked in there,
That's
then
correct.
it would be similar to like saying if you had a storage shed and your 2 parking spaces
It's
are gonna
supposed to
be
be
in
in
front
front of
there.
the storage, right, I get it.
So he's showing 2 spaces there and 2 in the front
Front,
for
yeah.
2-family house needs to require to propose a minimum of 4, and that's how they.
And that's how we got it, okay, I was
can
good.
speak?
Yes, sir.
To me, it's very simple. You've shown us a good plan, it's only gonna accommodate 1 car, you've made the arrangements, and there's parking in the back if you need it for whatever reason. Other people do have it, which I consider too, so I would personally vote yes to this.
Thank you.
Subject, of course, to getting the curb cut, which it has to be.
I just also like to say that we want to solve this problem. We want to respect the conditions that we have for the community. At the same time, as you pointed out, there's been an exception made when there are certain circumstances that exist. And it appears that, in my view, that you've made a case for that. And as long as you abide by the conditions, I would be inclined to support giving you the variance.
Thank you.
Oh, I don't think there's much more to add, subject to the curb cut. I have to agree with my
Thank you.
Can we call for a vote?
Do we need public,
Yeah.
Oh, was there opposition or?
I don't know, so is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this matter? No? Okay, so, since there being no one from the public speaking on this matter, if I can get a motion
Move to close?
to close this public hearing and
No. Okay. And also move,
motion, all those in favor?
yeah,
Aye.
a move to grant the variance with the, subject to the curb cut
Okay, can I
And
get a
the
second?
plan.
and the plan. The plan as submitted.
Yes,
Yep.
understood.
All those in,
Aye.
we have a motion and a second, all those in favor?
Thank
you. Motion granted. Again, it does have to go.
I understand.
Approval of DPW.
Okay.
That
He called me. He said, as long as you guys grant, he has no problem.
Good.
Just know that.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
No, I need motion and a second. A second.
We all pay.
You guys got me all set.
Yeah, we mumble a little bit.
I know, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I didn't say, who said that? Okay.
Next up is ZBA 2519, 31 Ferris Place. The applicant has requested an adjournment until the April meeting.
Okay. EDPA, huh? Okay.
Can I get a motion to adjourn 31 Ferris Place?
Motion to adjourn
April.
to April.
Second.
I want to just say on the record, my recollection on this case, there's been a number of adjournment requests on
This
this.
is gonna be the last.
This is the final adjournment. This is the last
Well,
adjournment.
they were here last month.
They were here last month.
Yeah,
Oh, I wasn't, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they were here
Okay.
last month, and we know
Okay.
that there are extenuating circumstances with this.
Okay, yeah,
So, that's for this one.
Yes.
yeah, all right, fine.
So all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. New business of the board, ZBA 2217 Victoria Home. Is there anyone here to speak on that matter?
Yes. Good evening. David Venditti, Gaines, Novi, Conzini, Costa, and Venditti. I'm counsel for Victoria Home. Good
Could you say
evening.
that slower?
David Venditti, Gaines, Novi, Conzini, Costa, and Venditti.
I'm
I'm counsel
messing with
for
you, my
Victoria
name
Home.
is Venditti.
Good evening, Chairperson Cheatham, Honorable Board, Village Staff, Special Counsel. We're here with members of Victoria Home, the Executive Director, and consultant to Victoria Home, Phyllis Bianco and James Bianco, seeking an extension of variances that were granted in September 2018. We've been before your board before. We're presently in the middle of an extension with the planning board for site plan approval, but as you know, you run at a different time period. Your approvals run for 6 months, where the approvals for the planning board run for 1 year. Mr. Bianco will address the board to let you know the circumstances surrounding this request. It's similar to the last one. It has to do basically with this not-for-profit caught in the challenge of raising over $30 million for this construction project, and we'll bring you up to date as to where we are with respect to that, and a request that you grant another extension on these variances. Mr. Bianco.
Good evening, everyone. James Bianco, 25 North Malcolm Street for Victoria Home. As David was saying, when I was here last, I believe in September, we asked for a second extension, and at that time, we had gone through 2 attempts with HUD financing, I think I explained, and we were at that time involved with possible bond financing with the Westchester LDC. We were waiting for the GMP price at that time, which we got in October, a month after we got the extension. Unfortunately, the GMP price was added higher than we expected, and the bond financing had to be put on hold until we could find some other alternative. So we're working with the Department of Health right now. We've been in talks with them, and we hope to have a meeting with them within the next 30 days in Albany for them to approve a financing plan that we currently have. We've mentioned it to them. It may include a third party to help us with the financing, but we would have to get their approval first before we could move ahead with anything. So that would probably be our last attempt at financing, so I don't want to stick my neck out, but this is probably going to be our final ask for an extension. I think if we can't get financing this way with the Department of Health, and we'll know that probably within the next 60 days, we'll have to go through some alternatives. So we're respectfully asking an extension, probably for the last time on this one.
And as you can imagine, right now, setting up a meeting with the Department of Health in New York State, they have other matters that have become quite pressing for them, so that's not the easiest thing to do at the moment.
That's the other thing with the coronavirus, we may be postponing a few days.
So you're asking for 60 days?
We're asking for a 6-month extension.
Oh, 6 months.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
We're hoping to have that meeting within 60 days.
Which that would match what the planning board has given.
Yes, we'd be on then time sync
Same.
within weeks of the planning board.
Do we need a motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Motion to extend for 6 months.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good work.
Bye.
Thank you. Safe out there.
You too. Up next is ZBA 2119 Birch Brook Manor. Is there anyone here to speak on that property?
Good evening, my name is Daniel Patrick from the law firm Cuddy and Fader. We are here seeking a 6-month extension of the zoning board's approval of the area variance issued last October. The applicant is still working through the planning board and BAR process. The planning board recently voted to approve the site plan and preliminary subdivision approval. We'll be back in front of the BAR at the end of this month to show them some revised plans, but we're hoping to wrap that process up fairly soon. But as you can see, this board's approval expires after 6 months, so we are here requesting an extension to allow us to finish going through the planning board BAR process and then, of course, proceed to the building permit application process.
Motion to approve.
Any
Well,
questions?
I just wanted to say that I know that there might be people here, we discussed, there might be people here from the public who,
Okay.
That's what I was gonna ask if there was any discussions among the board first.
Sure, okay.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this matter?
Yes,
That's
related,
before us, just for the 6-month approval.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Honorable Marlene Cheatham, the Zoning Board of Appeals. My name is Roger Boncharia, and I reside at 16 Holbrook Road in the village of Briarcliff Manor, New York. I live about a half-mile up from the road from the Birchbrook Manor proposed subdivision, tax map 97.07. I come today to present my concerns and opposition to extending their application as it stands now. When this subdivision and variance was put before the board in September 2019 meeting by the Birchbrook Manor attorneys, Mr. Anthony Joffre III of the law firm Cuddy and Fader. They requested relief based on their answers to 9 questions. So I'm going to address a couple of those questions today. Question 5 of that application asks, how does the proposed variance not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical environment conditions in the neighborhood or district? According to a report published by the Ossining EAC, they are very concerned with the effects of this project that it will have on the environmental quality. The report states the applicant has proposed constructing on this complex a small 1.12 acre parcel that contains one stream and is directly adjacent to a second stream, and it's mapped by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. These streams first flow into the Sparta Brook, which subsequently spills into the Hudson River. This will most certainly have deleterious long-term effects on the water quality of the Sparta Brook and by way of the connected hydrology between the water bodies and the Hudson River. The report made several recommendations, which include, number 1, that there be oversight and power to ensure a vigorous environmental review. 2, a hydrology study. Why? Because the land survey indicates that the building envelope will not only be in the wetland, but also directly in the stream itself. This will not only affect the water quality in the stream, and eventually the Hudson River, but also create potential bottlenecking issues to the area upstream from the site. Dozens of village homeowners could be negatively affected by any hydrological changes to the stream. Exploring the potential upstream and downstream effects and the disturbance that result in construction is something that needs to be explored.
Okay,
This-
but those issues are not something that this board addresses.
It's not, but I'd like to make this
But
on
if
public
it's-
record so that you are
I
aware.
don't think this is the appropriate board for that.
Right.
We went to the the planning board and had this discussion. Prior to this subdivision being approved, back in September, a lot of you folks were not actually on the zoning board
That
at the
is
time.
correct.
Is that a correct statement? And if that is correct, there are a lot of things that were not considered in this subdivision. This, particularly here, the impact on the environment. And that is one of the reasons why I'm here. There wasn't even a look and a walkthrough by the zoning board at the time when this was done.
But before this board currently is just the application to give them a 6-month extension on the application that has already been approved by this board, so,
An area variance.
an area variance.
Yes.
So, and that's just the area variance, so I think that we're not, and correct me if I'm wrong, at a place where we can look outside of what's before us, and what they're asking is just a 6-month extension. And I think that,
Yeah, I was gonna say, the question I would ask is there a reason why they should not be given a 6-month extension? That's the question that
But-
you need to be speaking
and
of.
I'm gonna piggyback on the 6-month extension that was granted. It was
Yeah.
granted, and I'm gonna use the exact words. It was granted with conditions, and the conditions are: this variance will become null and void unless construction is commenced and diligently pursued within 6 months of the date of granting of the variance, unless renewed upon application to the zoning board. So that's why they're here now. All construction shall comply with all requirements of the building department and any other department, agency, or board having jurisdiction. So that's important. We are not the only board that they need to come before that has to approve, and he needs approval across the board to get this project done.
Agreed. However, my appeal to you today is because of the fact that right now, under what they're looking to do, will have a deleterious effect on the community. When, in that application that had been approved, where a lot of you weren't actually in that decision-making, there were questions that were answered that were not completely factual. And so that is the reason why I ask and implore each of you guys to hold off on the extension at this point until you have had a chance to thoroughly review the actual land itself that's in question and what it is that will be impacted here. This is your community that's at stake right now.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
If we held off on granting this, and we all gotten on the bus and went over there and looked, at the, hold on, and looked, and found out that they're in fact building it in a wetlands over a stream, do we have any authority to change anything? We don't, right?
No.
So even if we agreed with you, right, that what they did was wrong, this board has very limited authority. I just experienced some of that limitation a few minutes ago. So we don't have the authority to fix this, even if you are absolutely correct. Correct? Anybody disagree with what I just said?
Particularly when dealing with a request for an extension, the board's authority is very limited. So only in the event that circumstances upon which the variance was granted have changed, and the circumstances that upon which the variance was granted no longer exist, then the board could consider not granting the extension. That is
That's
the
it.
extent of your authority.
Okay, so
Just
the
to make
next
sure,
question
I
is,
know how much you care about this, I get it. And the issue that we have here is whether we can or should grant an extension. And generally speaking, as this body does, usually if you ask for an extension and you show that you've been diligent and you have good reasons for the extension, we grant that because we have to be fair to the applicant. I hear your
And
concern.
what is the definition of "and be diligent"?
And diligent, in other words, that you are taking affirmative steps to move along in your process. If there's some kind of delay that is not due to any of your lack of not moving the process forward, that's how we have to evaluate it. It's a very limited thing that we can do, because we have to evaluate it and say, you know, people make applications to this body, and sometimes they need an extension. And if it's because of no fault of their own, that it's not like they sat down and didn't do anything, but if they're doing what they need to be doing, but they haven't finished, we have to give that flexibility. But I hear what you're saying with a lot of concern, but maybe that needs to be brought up in a different environment.
Which brings us to where?
The concerns he's expressing sound like planning board
So-
concerns.
Those are planning board.
So this needs to go back to the planning, but now question, because this majority of people in this room right now were not on the board when they granted this. And possibly some of us might not have voted to, had we been here. Are we allowed, this body, to make a recommendation from this body to the planning board that they review it?
They already granted.
They're already.
So we are not allowed to do that. I just want to be clear.
I'd like to ask under what rules does that prohibit you from actually doing your due diligence? Because if there is a rule that prohibits you from doing your due diligence, I'd like to know about it, and I think that should be on public record.
What I just said regarding their authority on extensions is state case law.
But that's not what I just asked.
No,
I was
I get
answering.
what you're asking, and I think again, before us today is the applicant just asking that we grant him the ability to continue to work with the planning board through the year term,
Yeah.
so another 6 months.
I'm happy to vote to do
And
that.
I think
But,
that, I
yeah.
think that's our reasonable service.
But
And I think that's our due diligence, that's our reasonable service. Within that time, within the 6 months, nothing happens, or the planning board will continue to work their process. If something happens, he needs to come back to us, absolutely, he will come back to us. So, I thank you for your comments.
I do want to make one more comment just for the record too. We did, along with 200 petitioners, put forth a demand that this be held off by the planning board. The planning board more or less ignored the request of 200 people in the community and just went forward with it anyway. Because of the fact that there's been so much lack of due diligence, there's been so much lack of the zoning board, it taking, not you guys, right? I'm talking about the people who were there prior to you, not actually going to look at that property at the time when this was presented, or even walk the property to see what the conditions were. Because they're building between two streams, and yet a variance was allowed on top of wetlands in a place where there is no stated wetland buffers. None. So that should be on record. And I understand where you are, I certainly appreciate it, and I can appreciate what state case law is. But I think it's incumbent upon you guys to really think about what it is that's coming before you. And I know that you are going to end up moving forward with granting them their extension, but knowing that full well that there is zero protection for more than a dozen homeowners who will experience some very severe flooding in their house, in their basement. You will impact the lives of children who walk down Holbrook Road to Walden Road by the fact that you even allow this to move forward. And I just want to state for the record, my daughter walks down to Ossining High School from Holbrook Road onto Walden Road, and this is a place that because of this being allowed, this poses a life safety issue, it poses an environmental issue, and there needs to be some real due diligence done by somebody. We could not get results over at the planning board. We've come to you with really everything that we've got to be able to help to create the better conditions than what we've got going on today.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board. Shane Farrell, 78 Walden Road, property right next door. Made it clear that's not going to go into all of the stuff that I was going to, but from what she's saying, that if there was some issues that you know, came up, if the application wasn't accurate, is that a reason that you can, I mean, your information that you had when you guys approved it, or the board approved it, was not accurate? Would that be a reason that you can review this and suspend it? Is that something?
I don't know the answer.
That's the planning board.
No, the
that's
zoning board, I'm talking about the zoning board application. The zoning board application that was presented to this board, was some information on that was not accurate.
The only thing that the zoning board looked at was the area variance that was asked for in regards to how the buildings and the lot was configured.
Yeah, it's only on the existing lot.
It's only on the existing lot.
Not, not the proposed subdivision of what you're
Right.
seeing as lot 2, there's no variances.
There's no variance.
No, I'm not sure, I'm just concerned, I'm wondering, like, there was an application to get this variance, correct?
That's correct, on
And
the
now there-
existing lot.
Right, on the existing lot. If there was some inaccuracies on that application, is there an issue there? That's what I'm just asking.
Potentially, depending on what the inaccuracies were.
Okay, well, they stated that they weren't gonna encroach on any wetlands, or be in any wetlands.
We don't have a wetlands.
You know, they're gonna be, I understand that they don't have a law, but they said they weren't gonna do it. The board read that, approved it based on that, now they're gonna be flush cutting trees.
Are you
Within-
talking about the activity that's happening on the new lot?
Yeah, well, yeah, but it was part of their application, I'm just,
No,
I'm,
that
I'm-
was, I don't believe that was part of the original.
That wasn't the
That wasn't the
application, it's the
application,
zoning
that's
board. The zoning
Okay.
board application was
Yeah.
only.
Only
for
on the
existing lot.
existing,
That didn't
come
nothing,
to us.
nothing
I'm
new.
getting, I'm getting you now, I'm sorry about that, I
Okay.
just,
I mean,
it's a little, I'm new to this, so.
We hear your
I-
frustration and your concern.
I'm not even frustrated, I'm just
And,
trying to figure it out.
okay,
Sorry.
no, I understand, it's
Right.
a little complicated, but again, all that we're being asked is to grant an extension that the applicant has requested,
Right.
and based on a standard of, well, has the applicant been acting in good faith, doing what they're, you know, we have to treat everybody who makes such a request with that same consideration. I hear you have concerns about the underlying application that they're putting forward, but we don't have that power at this
Well, it
moment.
seems like nobody has that power, because we get bounced around to everybody, and it just,
Well,
where do,
ask
who do we
council,
turn to?
how.
I've even reached out to the village manager, and they won't speak to me. I'm not sure who we reach, I'm just,
I want to ask
Where do we
council
go?
a question. What, for the public, I mean, so what is their method of relief to address this?
To address a planning board decision that you're not happy with?
well, they closed the
Well,
public
is-
hearing, is there gonna be, I mean.
Is there a
we-
secret process?
Secra was completed
Okay.
upon adoption of the subdivision and site plan application. Yeah, the public hearing took place before the planning board. It took place over many meetings. And at this point, the BAR process is still happening,
Okay.
so,
Is there public hearings on that type of thing? I'm new to the project, I'm just trying to,
right.
you know, understand, because it seems like they're saying it's your job, then you say it's their job, and it's really confusing on
Well, it is a
who's the
complicated
response.
project.
It is.
I know.
I imagine. So I'm just, if anybody can somehow give me some guidance, that would be great, I would appreciate it.
Unfortunately.
Go back to the zoning board, planning board?
So before the planning board, the applicant received, preliminary subdivision and site plan approval. They will need to get final subdivision and site plan approval. I'm not gonna look right now to find the exact code citations. I think those require additional public hearings. I'm looking at the applicant's counsel like he knows any
I
better.
believe it's discretionary up to the planning board.
Okay, so I
Okay.
don't have that right now.
Right, so it's up to them.
It's potential.
It seems like
It's
they're.
potential.
Okay.
Potentially more
Well, so there's
public
only
comment.
potential. I get you. Okay, nope, I started.
No, it's okay.
No, it's okay.
It's
Thank
really
you.
confusing, that's all.
No,
I
it's
appreciate
understood.
the clarity. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak to the area variance on this project? If not, we're going to move ahead. Can I get a motion to, from the board, whether to
Approve
go-
the extension.
approve or disapprove the request before us?
Motion to grant the extension?
Can I get a second? It would be a motion to grant the extension with the conditions from the prior
Right.
approval. Can I get a second? Yes, okay, George. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Does anyone?
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstain?
I just cast my vote as present.
Okay, present.
What does that mean?
Means I'm here, but I'm not taking, not casting a vote. I was present, but I chose not to vote for or against.
Um, I guess the majority of the board has voted and your request has been granted.
Thank you very much, I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Good night.
I just would say that I want to know more about the concerns that have been raised by the community
You
on
bet.
this. So,
I get it.
Yeah.
But I think the planning board is going to,
Sure.
their feet are going to be held to the fire in that.
okay.
I think that it's incumbent upon us to at least allow them to have the opportunity to work along with the planning board for the next 6 months. That's my.
Yeah, those are the concerns they should
Sure.
delve into very
And they
deeply
will.
at this point.
And they-
I'm sure they will.
The concept of good faith is why I voted no. Because clearly, if this is in fact a wetland, and in fact that it shouldn't have been approved by the prior board,
But
then.
we have nothing to do, see,
Right,
that's what.
but there are
our
questions of whether
approval-
good
and-
faith was met, so I have to
Our
vote no on anything
approval-
like that.
This board's approval is on the existing building and so it has nothing to do with the new development and the wetlands. It is on the existing property that already has a building on it.
I get it, except they can't build the new one without getting the variance on the other property, because it,
Our variance has nothing to do with the other property.
sure it does.
No, it's only on the building that's there.
Are you sure?
It's on the existing.
It's on the
property.
It's only on the existing
Yes,
building.
that's why I was
Has
trying to make that
nothing to do,
clear.
it's a whole separate project.
It's not a step.
It's not a project, it's to bring the existing, property into conformity with the zoning code.
Because it was
Right.
non-conforming.
It was not
It was built
conforming.
Right,
prior to
I
the
read that.
existing.
Okay, so-
I get it, okay, I just don't, it doesn't seem right to me.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
ZBA 04, where are we? I don't know.
2-0.
Oh,
Eight
two-
Maple Place.
Oh, 04208 Maple Place?
Yep.
Is there someone here to speak to that?
Adjourn.
Oh, I'm sorry, that application is requested adjourned to the April meeting. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
ZBA 0520 14 Church Street, and I'm gonna ask that the whole room not come up to speak to it. No.
Okay. Let me just get the visuals together. And while it's being done, I'll introduce myself. My name is Wayne Spector. I'm an attorney. I represent the applicant Samba Management Corp. I want to thank the chairperson and the board tonight for hearing this application, and the staff members as well for reviewing it. And just give you a brief description. I've submitted, I believe, a very extensive and very explanatory package here. But this is an application for a use variance, and so it does require some additional explanations, but I also want to introduce who I have with me tonight on this big project. Mr. Angelo Trediti is here. He is the principal of the applicant Samba Management Corp. Mr. Mark Fry, who is a planning consultant, has been working with my client as well. I also have Peter Kurth, who is the architect on the project. And I have Mr. Giulio Vitolo, who is a realtor, a commercial realtor with Coldwell Banker Commercial Real Estate. Here to lend his support as well to the, and also answer any questions that may be related at all to the application, since there is information that is included in the packet with respect to local commercial real estate conditions in the community. I actually was here not that long ago, maybe about 6 months ago, on a very similar project at 17 Pleasantville Road, and I'm not saying that obviously everyone is different, but there are very similar issues between that one and this one as well. That was also in a district where a mixed use was allowed, but commercial had to be on the lower level. In this particular instance, this is a property that is a pre-existing building. We're not proposing that anything be built. The building, it's been there, I believe, since the 1950s, and it's always been an office building at 14 Church Street. No proposal is being made to change or alter the exterior of the building. It's in the VC, or the Village Center District, and the application is for variance to the Village Section 270-18C1 code, which allows mixed use, but requires that the property have commercial below and residential above. And the basis for the application, and it follows the state standards for use variance, is that my client has experienced a hardship. Mr. Trinity's company purchased the building in 2017. At that time, there were some commercial tenants that were in the building, including a doctor's office as well. Right now, the building is left with one commercial tenant. In 2017, my client applied for and was granted a special use permit to convert the upstairs level of the building to residential. And in fact, the upstairs was converted, a certificate of occupancy was granted, and there were 4 tenants living upstairs. There was one studio apartment, a 1-bedroom and 2 2-bedrooms. What is being proposed is to allow for the entire building to be converted to residential, which would require the variance because it will no longer be mixed use. And what is being proposed is that there would be 4 additional apartments below, which will essentially mirror the ones that are above. There are some very unusual aspects of this building which make this unique and this application unique. The hardship applies in particular to this building because of the the geometry of the street that the building is located on and the slope that the building is on, as you can see. Unlike many other commercial properties in the VC district, this building has one entrance to it, which would be typical for an office building. However, it cannot be retrofitted to allow any kind of ground level entry from the street for either retail, commercial, banking, any kind of service that would normally thrive with a street level entrance. The lower level, which is where the proposed apartments are proposed, is partially below, but not fully below. And as a result of that construction, there's only one entrance to the building, as you can see from the photographs that is above, that's behind you. And that's one entrance which leads to a vestibule, and when you come into the building, you go into the vestibule, and then it's the equivalent of a split level for a commercial building as opposed to a standard construction. So you come in, there's a little hallway, then there are 2 doors which separate, one going up maybe 5 steps and one going down maybe 5 or 6 steps as well to the lower level. The lower level is where there's one remaining commercial tenant in the building. So as a result of that, you also cannot have separate entrances for the commercial and the residential use, which is the required and methodology for a mixed-use building in the village. Now, this was allowed, I'm assuming because originally there was no other way to do it, and the vestibule, the entrances internally were considered to be the separate entrances to the building, but that's not really the case. There really is only one entrance to the building, and for security purposes, people have to come in, the residents have to come in, there's a locked door, and then there's another door leading downstairs as well. We have submitted extensive materials as part of our application, including, to meet our burden, financial information as well concerning the commercial viability of the building as is. But also, which again mirrors the prior application that I was hearing several months ago. The unfortunate weakness of the commercial real estate market for office space downtown and for space that would be appropriate for this building. And that's Mr. Vitolo, our real estate consultant, who has had a listing on the building since the building was purchased by my client, is here if there's any questions, and also to confirm and to verify his findings, and the fact that despite 2 years of efforts, my client has not been able to procure additional tenants for the commercial space downstairs. My client has put extensive improvements into the building with the systems of the building. He has renovated the interior hallways and the common area space to make it more attractive. Despite that and the extensive investment, it's still in the same condition where he cannot rent out that lower level. He's not been able to do so successfully. And the 2 years of that process constitutes the hardship that is required to be shown. The geometry of the building and the slope of the building and the inability to properly market the space for uses that are prominent in downtown, which are buildings that have storefront or exterior entrances or abilities to put restaurants or other spaces that would be normally accessed from the ground level, make this a unique situation that does not apply to other properties. As a matter of fact, I'm sure you're all familiar with that particular street and its unique character in the VC district. It's, as I referred to it in my submission, it's almost as if it's an appendage to the VC. It's not really part of the main commercial character of that district. It's there's really nothing. There's an office building which used to house, or does still house, the Open Door, which has a large parking lot. The building does not have additional space. It cannot be expanded, and you really can't change the exterior. Mr. Kurth, who's here as the architect, can answer any questions and can support that as well. The information that I also supplied from my client's accounting consultant also confirms the fact that based on the price of the building, the investment in the building, the current income, and taking into account factors such as additional expenses that will be incurred, and also an internal loan between my client's company and himself to another entity and the ownership entity, and the essentially unpaid interest on that. The building is really operating, at least for 2018, operated at a loss. But even at this point, you're talking about returns well below 2% on the building as is. And as a matter of fact, I do have a revised letter from the accountant. It doesn't change the actual end findings, but it just references the debt service, which was not actually factored in originally. But nonetheless, we're talking about an annual return of less than 2% on the property based on the investment, the income, and on the assumption that continuing efforts to rent the commercial space will not be successful. And I'm happy to. I would like to be able to update and maybe circulate this letter, which is just a slight revision to Mr. Frankel's letter relating to the financial side of this. As far as the submissions, you'll see we have a copy of the deed, the survey, we have the photographs, area photographs as well, the tax map. We've also submitted architectural plans, a letter from, like I said, our realtor, the listing agreements, and I also supplied the contract of sale for the premises for the purpose of showing the price that was paid, and the fact that the tenants who were in residence at the time, as well as the current rent roll for the property, as well as the financial information. The standards for a use variance, I understand, are very specific, and we are required to meet them. So I do go through, in my submission, analysis of potential other uses, and I believe I adequately addressed the fact that that we are kind of stuck here, because there aren't any other potential uses that we could really put this building to for other than office and residential. And with the office market being what it is, we don't feel that at this point it's viable to continue to rent it and continue to operate at a loss. It's very unlikely, given the 2-year history of looking for tenants, that my client's going to find additional commercial tenants. The hardship, as I stated, again, comes down to the fact that in its current condition and with the market conditions the way they are, my client cannot realize a reasonable return on the property, and that it is unique to this property because of the topography and the construction of the building. The other fact is the character of the neighborhood. Once again, as we all know, if you look at when you look at the description of the purposes and the goals of the VC district, it is to bring in more residents, more foot traffic in the village, more people to spend money in the village and business in the village. And residential is an important component of that. And adding 4 additional residences is going to promote that vision as well for the district, and just add, again, more to the vitality of the village center. My client. And the need in the village for decent housing also is well known. When my client did renovate the 4 upstairs apartments, the response when those units went on the market was quite overwhelming. There's no specific targeted group that he's looking for, but it seems that properties like this seem to attract younger professionals, people who are in need of maybe first homes. It's what the village is, what I think is looking for as well in the village. The rents are reasonable, which I address in my submission as well. These would not be considered by any stretch of the imagination luxury type rents for a property like this.
May I ask what the rents are actually?
Sure. It is in the
Page 3 of your
It is
letter.
page 3. That's correct. And actually, the rent roll is actually included with the package. So.
No, I understand. So, but my question is, what is the 1-bedroom? What is the 2-bed? What are the individual rents on the property?
Sure.
Break it down.
Yeah, if you could break it down.
Yeah,
Angelo.
Come step to the microphone.
Yes, please come on. Mr. Traditi.
Hey guys, how are you? My name is Angelo Tradito. I'm the owner of 14 Church.
Okay.
Nice to meet you guys. So the rents are, we have a 1-bedroom with a den, it's $2,200. I have another 1-bedroom that's a very big 1-bedroom. It's about 800 square feet. That's going for $2,000. Then I have another 1-bedroom that's about 750 square feet. That's going for about $1,900. And then I have a studio, which is going for $1,750, which is about 620 square feet. Give or
And
take.
the proposed rents for the new units downstairs would be?
Basically the same.
Do these apartments come with parking?
There is no parking. We have vouchers for the building.
Second question.
Vouchers for the building to park where?
In the municipal lots around the building, so they get special permits.
That's one of the questions I was gonna ask, is because I saw on the plan, it said with the apartments that are being proposed that there's an additional 5 spaces. And based on the code, if you're adding where you need additional parking, and it's basically, you parked it down as a parking waiver, and in this particular application, a parking waiver wouldn't apply. You would have to get a variance for parking, which you would have to add to this application.
Well, the vouchers that he currently has for how many spaces, I believe?
There's 4 for the downstairs?
Yeah.
4 spaces.
You do.
Yeah.
So he was not required to get a variance for the 4 spaces for the apartments that are upstairs.
It's because they were a conditional use, permitted or a conditional use. This is not.
Well, my understanding was that that my client still needs to apply for a conditional permit as well. So that this variance, I do not believe that has to be addressed here. That's
I think
also.
you can apply separately for it.
My understanding was that would be before the planning board for the conditional use permit.
Hold on.
Well, the planning board can't grant a variance for parking. They can give a parking waiver, but I don't think this particular application, where you're asking for apartments to be on the first floor, which is not a permitted use, that's why you're asking for a variance, would require a variance for the parking to accommodate those parking spaces.
Yeah.
Because you can only get a waiver for, if you were changing a current use for a permitted use or a conditional use, and the use that you're asking for on the first floor is neither, it's a non-permitted use. That's the reason why you're here for a variance.
It's a variance from a particular section, but we were working under the assumption that we still need to go for a conditional use permit.
Well, only because apartments in the village center are considered conditional uses.
So I'm not
If
sure
you-
why
if you-
the same standard wouldn't apply for that permit, and which would
Because
cover the parking as well.
I believe, and I guess you can elaborate on that, if the apartments that you're asking for are located in the building that are not permitted on the first floor, then in this particular case, they're really not conditional, they're subject to getting a variance, because they're not permitted.
But don't we still have to go to the planning board for a conditional use permit?
I think once you get
I
the
am-
variance,
Once you- right.
you would need conditional use, but primarily I would look at what this waiver section says as not applying to you right now because it's not permitted.
Good evening, my name is Mark Fry. I'm a land use planner and familiar with Austining. Mr. Bailey, nice to see you again. Nice to see some familiar faces, nice to see Ms. Brosey. Welcome as special counsel.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And I do have something, we were relying, as we went through the process, they reached out to me because I've done other variances. Angela reached out to me, I did Lincoln School and the Church Court. And we're relying on your letter, Mr. Agostinelli, of December 19th, 2019, which we've included in your package there.
Which letter is that?
This is the second revision list. You presented a revision list to Mr. Kurth, and he worked through all of those changes, and we'll show you those changes, separate and apart from this, of course, on the mechanicals and various things in the proposed plans. In addition to that, once that was complete, you provided the letter dated December 19th to us, which states, the Village of Austining zoning code indicates that the proposed residential apartments are conditional use, which requires approval from the Village of Austining Planning Board. First of all, the first paragraph states that the Village of Austining zoning code indicates that residential uses are only permitted above commercial uses, and that a minimum habitable square footage is required for the residential apartments in the VC Village Center District, and we're certainly in full agreement of all that. A zoning variance is required for the proposed first floor apartments. That's what we're here for, a use variance. And a possible variance is required for the habitable apartment square footage of each proposed apartment, pending submitting the proposed square footage of the apartments. Please contact the Village of Austining Planning Department to request an application to the ZBA, which we did. Now, to answer the second minor point first, all of the 4 units that we are proposing, the code requires 450 square feet for each of the studios and so forth. It's in our submission. And our plans have shown that we meet that requirement. And the plans have been so marked and it's included in our submission. As to the conditional use, it is the planning, the use variance here, as the code is written. Residential dwelling uses, which are permitted as conditional uses, shall be applicable to the additional requirements set forth in 270-26 and 270-51. That tells us, of course, that the residential uses are only permitted above non-residential. We all know that. It has talks about the habitable square footage. But once we have that use variance, we can't go anywhere. We can't go further without a use variance that will allow a residential use on the ground floor, on the first floor. So if that variance is not granted, that use variance, we go no further. As to the granting of a conditional use permit, that is, according to the local code, the purview of the planning board. So for the planning, and we have been instructed by Mr. Agostinelli to proceed to the planning
Yeah,
board
I think what Mark
for
is...
that second
Sorry.
approval.
I think what Mark is really trying to say is that we considered, as we all know, the pre-app meeting is required in order to identify what you need to do. And we considered that to be our instructions as to what we needed to do and why we're here today for this.
That's understood.
And I'm not saying, I think there is a little bit of gray area here.
No,
in
I
that
understand.
respect.
I would think by the way we're reading it in the code is if the apartments that were put on the second floor were conditional, and therefore I think prior to that, they were residential uses, correct?
No.
Those were not.
No, those
on the
were-
second
But they
floor,
were,
not
but the use,
conditional.
okay, so, but the use that was there before was either a conditional or permitted use.
Well, it was a principal, we went from the second floor, we went from principal permitted use office to principal permitted use residential,
Right.
because
With a conditional
there
use
is,
permit.
Right.
Right, but
because,
with the conditional use permit, and in that case, based on what the law says, the planning board can grant you a parking waiver because you're keeping it within either a conditional use or permitted use.
Right.
In this particular case, the 5 additional spaces that you're asking for on the first floor, since they're not a conditional use, and they're not a conditional use because you're asking for apartments located on the first floor, and you're asking for a variance, in those particular parking spaces, I believe you may need to also add to this for a variance from this board for the 5 additional spaces.
up until now, just so we're on the same page in terms of the history of the application, the planning board granted the waivers for a total of 15 spaces. When we go, which is both the upper and the lower floor. When we go from what would be required, today we are deemed to have adequate parking for the 4 office units. That's a higher per square foot requirement. When we go from the total 15 parking waivers that we have now, if you grant this approval, we will go down to a total need based on the parking regulations for the various sizes of apartments of 9. So we're going from a
More
pre-existing.
parking intensive
We're going
use.
from a more parking intensive to less parking intensive, and we had intended to present that to the planning board and surrender, essentially, ask them to confirm.
If they ask for them.
Surrender the excess parking permits to the planning board. I
With the
think
waivers.
with the waivers. I think one of the questions is, once a permit is granted, and it is for those watching, a conditional use is an as-of-right use subject to certain conditions. If those conditions are met, then it becomes a conforming use. a special
I think our interpretation has always been that, that we understand that by getting this variance, we're not getting as of right, we're just getting as of right the ability to apply for a conditional use permit for the additional
the
apartments.
planning board.
That's the way we approach this.
So I'll defer the final decision for the legal matter with the attorney.
I mean,
Well, it's also an
But
interpretive matter for the board.
Why I'm bringing it up to your attention now is if that is a requirement, you may want to add that as part of getting that variance while you're in front of the board.
What I might suggest is this, and that's a very good point, Mr. Agostinelli, but let me
Can
just
I-
suggest this,
Yes.
if I might.
Can I stop you there?
Yeah.
So the question that we need to kind of like look at is if they would just amend
Right.
their application here and now.
To include the parking.
To include the parking.
Well, they might also want to present additional proof if we if you did require them to.
I don't want
No, but they might want it.
I mean, I'm not sure if we're being told that we can tonight apply to this board to consider the additional variance.
Please.
I would say this, that I would amend it to apply for either an interpretation and/or a variance with respect to.
Okay.
But if you have a variance for commercial parking, which you said you had, what, 15?
We have
15 waivers as of
Right,
now.
but now we're not commercial, so those permits aren't valid.
Right.
That's correct.
So now you need the variance
So now
here,
they
so,
need new permits.
so just do that.
But the new permits have to be from the planning, I mean, not, the planning board has to agree to the permit.
But we have to agree to allow the parking for the apartments if we agree to the apartments.
Right.
Right.
Again, I guess it's confusing
I
because what
understand,
happened.
I
Okay, so,
understand that,
so
but
that, I think
so-
that's, so rather than, I'm trying to stop them from having to come back here next month.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
So we would,
I'm trying to do
if we
it
were
right.
to amend it, we would be asking you, we did the math.
Yeah.
9, we have 15, let the record show, and that is a matter of public record.
No, I
Well,
understand that, but we
I
can't
want to,
approve it.
I would, the other confusing thing is, since we already have a CO for the apartments upstairs, and this matter was not previously addressed.
The planning board has to deal with those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We have,
approved
we already
variance to
have
give them
waivers
residential
that have
parking.
been granted
But they have to
when the
get
special use
permits
permit was granted for the
by the
upstairs.
planning board.
They would have to have been included in that, I would assume.
I would
They have to get some back.
I'm sorry, I missed
Okay,
the,
so and I'm gonna defer to our legal counsel on this one. Understand that what they have currently is for the commercial property on the first floor.
And the
No.
residential upstairs.
we have
Okay, I-
the
Yes.
residential
I'm talking
on
about the
2.
first floor. So the first floor is commercial, and they have parking waivers for the first floor commercial. If they go to an apartment on the first floor, which is now another non-conforming use of that building, I'm gonna say I'm not going to think that those waivers may not travel with the building, with that first floor, okay?
Because you're taking a permitted use to a non-permitted.
Okay,
Right,
so
exactly.
in that case,
They need a waiver.
they need to come to us, not a waiver, they need to come to this, they would come to us to ask for parking, okay, at baseline parking for the residents of the building on the first floor because it's non-conforming.
Right.
Okay.
Got it?
Or-
Does that check all the boxes, am I?
Well, let me ask again.
So that's why we're asking that if you're going to come before us to ask for the non-conforming for the first floor, that you ask for it with the parking
With
attached.
the parking included. And
For the
then you
first,
get it
for the
done.
first
The first
floor,
floor.
because I don't want it to impact the second floor
is
waivers.
not
which-
here.
The second floor is already,
Done.
That's already done.
okay, but we're
So-
talking about taking a non-conforming use on the first floor you're changing what you're putting on the first floor. So if you're starting from scratch on the first floor, then you have to start from scratch with everything.
But just for a point of clarity, the first floor is conforming. It was built as an office building, can
Okay,
continue.
but
it's
you're
not
talking
gonna be
about
residential.
putting apartments and
It's
not.
not, it won't be.
Okay,
So at the
so in
point-
that, as soon as you say that, it's not conforming.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
if-
Oh, right,
Make a
Okay.
proposed use is
So
not
can,
conforming.
so I'm gonna ask that.
Can we make a
Is there
motion
anyone from the
What
public
are
that
you
wants to
making a
speak?
motion for?
to approve changing to apartments with the
Wait,
appropriate
No,
parking?
not
no,
yet.
not yet.
No.
Okay.
Is there anyone? in the-
Before, we actually had a number of additional presentation materials that we wanted to present to you. We didn't expect to get into this.
Well, this is the critical thing to the whole project.
Okay, this is, we understand.
The other
You
one
have the
is-
package with all
Yeah.
the submissions.
We've seen everything.
Okay. I got it.
So if you submit it,
It's all there.
So it's up to the legal people to
Let's
tell
see
us.
what they have to say.
I need to make sure.
If we're not sure, we're gonna have to put it off for next month.
I would like to avoid my client having to come back next month, because I think it's a legitimate question or issue, given, I mean, the other point which I was going to raise is that, you know, if you approve the variance, you could do it with the condition that it be subject to the planning board's granting of the waivers as well.
But if
And-
it's not even their responsibility
Right.
based on interpretation of the code, then
Right.
that's not a valid condition.
Okay. Thank you.
In the way it's written. Okay, good.
How do we stand on this legally now?
Well, I know how I feel about it, but I don't know how the board feels about
Well, you
it.
tell me how.
Yeah, tell us how you feel.
That's
Well,
why you're here.
my understanding is that the applicant just amended their application to include a parking variance and/or an interpretation from the board
That's correct.
regarding, section 270-30A 12. That's a section that you have to decide whether you would render an interpretation of, or whether you would render, a parking variance.
Board's
So-
discretion.
At the board's discretion. I'm not sure that you all have even reviewed that section of the code and understand what it means to render an interpretation at this point, since we have so many new members. Also, that's my main issue right there.
Okay.
And as for, so I think it's fine for the applicant to amend their application on the fly like that if they're okay with it. But I need the board to understand what they're doing
At this,
at this point, what that means for them to be doing. And I
That's
don't know that you
exactly
do.
the right answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I think the board needs to be able to have time to look at the code, to have time to deliberate. And you also need to understand the requirements for granting a use variance, which I was gonna tell you. Okay. But I don't even know if that's something that I need to read to you right now, depending on how everyone is feeling about.
I think it'd be in the board's best interest to review the code section and review, in connection with this very big submission you guys did make and obviously spent a lot of time and effort putting together. I'm of the opinion that I'd like to review this with the code section that you would like us to render an interpretation of. I understand the delay would impact your client, but I think in order to get a full and fair hearing of the matter, we would need to adjourn it for a month.
Is it at all within the realm of possibility to segregate the two variances and maybe have a decision on at least one aspect of it, on the use variance, or are they two so interrelated that you can't?
They're interrelated.
No, you can't.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I thought I would ask.
Fair question, but it's-
It's a good question.
Particularly, the language that's particularly important here in terms of the parking issue is in subsection A, I think, Joe, right?
And that was 270, 31?
270-30A 12A, am I right? The change is from one permitted or conditional use in the district to another permitted or conditional use in the district. That's one of the conditions, and all of the following conditions, A, B, C, D, in that section have to be met for this waiver language to apply. So you guys need to consider that.
And who
Well,
would
we are
grant that
we are
waiver?
asking for the permitted use downstairs to be allowed to be converted to another conditional use.
But it's not conditional currently. That's what they need to interpret. They need to
Right.
think about that.
So,
And then, go ahead.
I think for the comfort of, again, new board members and the board itself, along with our attorney and the building department, we kind of need to vet this out just a little bit more.
Okay.
I would ask that, Mr. Spector, if you would just do us a, like a one page blurb.
A
Like, don't
short
write us a
memo.
book.
Confine it to one page?
Yes, please.
It's hard for
That's gonna
attorneys.
be.
We are limiting you to the front page of one piece of paper.
Are you asking him to submit something new on the parking
Yes,
and
with the,
interpretation?
Interpretation
Well,
or to
it's-
submit a variance?
to
I mean,
submit
on the
variance.
interpretation, I'm not sure,
I'm not asking him for his interpretation, I'm
No.
asking him to amend what he's requesting,
Okay.
Okay,
to include what he would like as far as the parking, I think.
fair
that
enough.
would- I think that would, so that, and we would like to adjourn this for 1 month.
1 month.
Um,
Move
And
to
Madam
adjourn
Chair,
for-
let me ask if also the council might, and Mr. Agostinelli, if you would include in that a review of this part of our submission, this December 19th letter, which is
Yes, if
what
we
we
have it all.
thought we were.
We have it.
We have it.
You have
Yeah.
that, but I think that is part of something that you'll.
We weren't trying to
want look at.
skirt anything, we,
Right.
Together.
I want you to understand.
No, it's just
Yeah.
that we want to make sure it's proper so that it doesn't go back and bite anything.
Right.
That's right.
And as a matter of general procedure, is it proper for counsel for the board and counsel for the applicant to touch base?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Oh,
I think that's fine.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
And I wanted to let you know, I will defer this entire presentation till later, just to keep it shorter.
Okay.
I was prepared to do it really fast, but
Yes.
this is gonna be the shortest
No, no.
ever.
Yeah.
No,
They're very nice.
I'm already familiar with the building.
Yes,
Thank you very
I think
much.
everybody has done a site visit every time they want to get a piece of pizza.
Good. It all depends on where you get your pizza
Okay.
from, that's right.
So again, can I get a formal motion to adjourn this?
Motion to adjourn till next month.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll see you next month.
We'll get it through.
Thank you.
If everybody in the group can attend, that's fine, as long as you're present.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yes.
That was the only one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really was. Thanks again. That was good.
ZBA, up next is ZBA 0620, 24 Aqueduct Street.
Good evening. Good evening, Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Henry Fajardo. I'd like to give my home address or the property address, where I actually live, or is it what address?
You do both.
24 Aqueduct, Austin, New York is the property that I'm here about, and I live in 10 Stewart Court, Otapan, New Jersey.
Okay, thank you.
It's my first time too, so take it easy on me. I'm here to request a use variance on a property that I purchased in June of July 2019. Upon purchasing this property from the auction, prior to making the purchase, the MLS listing that I had submitted said that the property was a two-family apartment with a walkout basement, which is a commercial zone. My broker asked for a foil for the property, and, you know, before the closing to make sure it was that, and the papers that I received from the village, the certificate of occupancies that were old, stated that it was also a two-family with a commercial garage storage area. Within a month of purchasing the property, I had a site plan with Mr. Agostinelli and somebody else, and I wanted to inquire on what can I actually do with this garage area that has already a kitchenette, it has a shower, and it looked like, according to the prior owner and the prior certificate of occupancies, there was an actual habitat there that was illegal, that was deemed to be, I guess, illegal, and I wanted to know, what can I use it for storage, or can I actually convert that space that's already there into a third apartment? And I was told that I could not use it as a commercial storage space unless it's strictly confined to one of the persons that's renting on the second or third floor. So I couldn't turn that into like a third-party business or area for storage or commercial, that it had to be either combined with the first floor, or I would have to, you know, apply for a use variance and see if I can get the permission to convert it into a legal three-family. So I submitted my application, and as far as changing the unit to a three-family, I'm not asking for a parking variance, because there's enough parking for 6 cars. I believe the law is, or the rule is 2 per family, so there's currently 2 families. There's enough for 6 cars. There's no change to the effect of the neighborhood, other than the building itself. I would just be removing a 1-bay garage door and adding a bay window. There's already a front entrance that goes into the garage space, and there's also an egress exit that goes out to the back, and there's a little patio with an open fence, so if there was a fire or any type of issue, people could go out to the front or the side and leave the property. And that's about it. As far as financial hardship, it would not be a hardship for me, to be totally honest with you. I'm not that example of the gentleman living on a pension that you have on the instruction there, but at this point, it would be a break-even scenario, or if I had to, if I had to spend some money into the property for upkeep, then at that point, I would be losing money. This is the plan of the, I think somebody's moving it around, thank you. If you go down one more, the second floor is existing, and if you can scroll down, I think it was down, Ms. Kane? Or up? Oh, no, up, I'm sorry. That's the space that I'm discussing, right in the, that would be the proposed studio apartment. And you can see that right where the arrow is, there's an entrance, and then towards the left side, there's an egress. And where that existing bay window is on the right side by the circle, Ms. Kane, yeah, right there, that's the garage door. I would just finish off the front of the building to match the way it is in brick, and I would just put a bay window, and I would put a wall to separate the living space between the bedroom. Again, there's already plumbing there, there's already a bathroom, there's already a shower, there's already a kitchenette, there's already kitchen cabinets. All of this was done prior to me purchasing the property. What I would do is, of course, I would file permits, I would do everything properly, unlike the first owner, and there's already a separate meter. So everything is in place. All I need to do is to get the permission to use the garage as a living space, a one studio apartment, and change the garage door to a bay window, and that's about it.
It's okay.
Can I ask a question, just quickly? There are 3 meters on this house and 3 mailboxes.
Right, because the previous owner converted this into a 3-family without any permits, because the C of O shows that it's a 2-family house. Con Edison actually would put 3 meters because you're allowed to have, if you're an absentee owner, you can have a meter for each apartment, and then an owner's meter, which would allow the owner to just pay for the electric for anywhere in the exterior of the building, common areas. So they don't, they allow a person to put a 3rd meter.
Got it. Question. Would this need to be inspected to make sure that the electrical and the plumbing and all that was done up to code?
Yes, he would have to, if it was granted to allow him to have the 3rd apartment, then we would have to, he'd go through the process of legalization for it, which would be including getting all the necessary inspections, like plumbing, electric, and so on.
Is there any reason, from your point of, from the building department and code enforcement, that we shouldn't do this?
The only reason why, obviously, that he was sent here is because the zoning district is a 2-family zoning district, and it's not a permitted use. It's only 3-family.
So we would have to make an exception for it?
You'd have to grant the variance for
We'd
it.
have to grant the variance.
And if I may, ladies and gentlemen, I also presented an aerial view of Aqueduct, and I also listed each family's apartment. So if you look up and down the street, there's 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 families that are all legal. They're all from the zone and the website. I forgot what it is, the geo. And I also went there, I checked meters, I checked mailboxes. So it's not that I want to make a 3-family in an area that's a single family. There's multiple areas, multiple apartments that are already existing. Yeah, no, sir. Yes, I would not change the character. Absolutely not.
Can I make a motion?
Hold on. I want to make sure the board understands what the test is for a use variance, because I know we have some new members. So when granting a use variance, the board has to, the applicant, I'm sorry, has to show that the applicable zoning regulations, so in this case for the T zone,
Yes, that's right.
and restrictions have caused unnecessary hardship to the applicant. And there are 4 conditions, all of which have to be proven by the applicant. In order to show hardship, the first is that the applicant cannot realize a reasonable return, provided that lack of return is substantial. as demonstrated by competent financial advice, or evidence, I'm sorry. 2, the alleged hardship relating to the property in question is unique and does not apply to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood. Did you raise your hand?
Pardon?
Did you raise your hand before?
Oh, no,
Oh
my God, I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
Let me turn this off.
The 3rd is the requested use variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And the 4th is that the alleged hardship has not been self-created. So all 4 of those conditions have to be met.
Oh. He didn't self-create it, it was there when he bought it, right? That would be not self-creating it. He didn't put that there, it was there when he bought it.
Self-created is kind of an interesting
Yeah.
factor.
That's how you look at it.
Yeah, it's how you
Take an
look at it.
expansive view or narrow view.
Right.
Okay, so how would it be self-created? This would help me to know.
It can be interpreted such that the purchaser should, if the condition was on the property at the time it was purchased, if the zoning regulations were already in place at the time it was purchased, and the purchaser could have found out those conditions, and nothing has changed since then that could be,
Well, I'm sorry, we finish, I'm sorry to interrupt. May I address one of these at a time and maybe start with that
Sure,
one?
yes.
Again, this was purchased by an auction, so these auctions are fast, it was online. I did see the property, and within less than a month's time, I went to the city, I got a foil, I did as much research as I could. I also put in the, again, the MLS listing where it says, and again, I did not do the MLS listing, but it says walkout basement, which is commercially zoned. So in my, I guess, defense, not necessarily defense, because I did nothing wrong here, but I did not self-create that. I did as much due diligence in the time that I had, and I figured, and I made the assumption that if, I wasn't even thinking about using it as a family residence. I was like, okay, great, I can use commercial space, I can rent it out to a third party. There's a warehouse right next to my, right next to the building, that maybe they can use some storage, there's ample, drive in and out, so I said, so either one would be fine. But then after speaking to the building department, I realized that, no, that's not as easy as just, I can rent it out to a third party.
Understood. I'm just trying to help.
And I just wanted, I think maybe if I guess I would address the 4 at a
Yeah.
time, so that way we can all be clear on
That's
the, I guess, the rules.
And also, just to understand, like, for the building department, why we had this conversation with you about what you can either apply for variance or bring the building into conformity for a T-zone, is because a lot of the other properties, I mean, they may be legal, but they could be legally pre-existing non-conforming. So they may have been there way before they changed that zoning district to a two-family zone district. And in that case, if they're pre-existing, once the district is changed, say, to a two-family zone district, whether that's when it was zoned that way, if that was correct or not, anything that doesn't comply with that zone, but it's prior to the change, they don't lose that use.
Yeah, no,
But in
I
this
understand,
case-
you explained that to me
Right,
before.
in
Yes, sir.
this case, the C of O was issued as a two-family home in a two-family zoning district, which was in conformance with that district. But obviously, the previous owner made a third apartment.
No, understood, and again, my only reason for bringing that up is that, again, they're not all single families, and I want to just, raise it up to a 3-family. It's already, I believe that, again, it wouldn't change the aesthetics, wouldn't change anything that's parking there. I'm not adding any square footage. All I'm doing is just changing the garage door, and I think, and that's it, and just cleaning it up and bringing it up to code, as you said, sir. I understand I'd have to check the plumbing, check the electricity, make sure that, because I didn't do that work.
Right.
So make sure that everything is up to code with fire, the rules. I assume also too that there's different rules between the 2-family and a 3-family that I would have to, be educated by the building department, then I would have to make the move to conform to those. So, I mean, did that cover that one?
Yeah,
That one,
creative, sure.
does that,
Well,
everybody
that's-
else?
I believe you didn't create the hardship. I think you came into it. You acted in good faith.
Well, I did the best as I could.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
I believe you acted in good faith.
Yes,
So-
thank you. And then I'm sorry if you don't mind, with
So-
any one of the other 3?
The first, the applicant cannot realize a reasonable return, provided that lack of return is substantial as demonstrated by competent financial evidence.
Okay, and, you know, currently, I am renting the legal third floor and the legal second floor. The basement, again, the area in question has not been used, nobody's living there, nothing's going on there. Currently, I'm getting, if you want numbers, I'm getting $3,300 in total income currently. And between the mortgage, my taxes, insurance, I'm already at 29.49. So currently, it's a gain of approximately $350, and that's, I think, very minimal for the amount of money that I spent to purchase the building. I bought it for $273, and the current value is approximately $350. But so there's an upside to about $350 per year, but that doesn't include if there's any snowfalls at $80 a pop. I mean, this year I got away with one. It doesn't include the water, $447 a year, or at least what I've paid so far. So, you know, I also want to maintain the properties. I don't want to just purchase it. I need to be able to have enough income to just be able to maintain it, keep the place looking good, you know, keep it safe, and keep it up to code as the years progress. Adding that other income, I think, because it's a small studio, and it's actually, I don't have the square footage, but it's not big at all. I think I could probably net anywhere between an extra $1,200 to $1,300. Again, I don't know. I think it's going to depend on the person and what I'm actually granted by the board. So if I didn't think about it, but if I get that uptake per month, then I would probably be at around a $12,000, anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000 increase, and that would still approximately be about 4%, according to my quick math, which I think is not an excessive rate of return for us.
So the apartment that you're proposing, how many square feet is that?
Let me just see. Because it's existing, so it should be on the, and I apologize, my architect, Susan Riordan, was supposed to be here, but she was not feeling well.
Maybe they have it on, she didn't state it on the plan. The reason why I asked this
Yes, sir.
question is because I believe in the two-family zone district, there's a minimum size of the apartments. I believe it's 800 square feet. So if the apartment proposed is under 800 square feet, you'd have to also ask for a variance for that as well. Let me see, it's in the table.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I can't answer that question, Ms. Agostini. I really don't know. I don't have the education to be able to answer that. I believe so, from what I recall, but I am not sure. I would have to get back to the board.
800, right. So you have to have a minimum of 800 square feet livable floor area. So that would actually include all the spaces, because there's a livable and habitable, and the livable actually gives you allowance to use spaces such as the bathroom, foyer, and all, that's all part of livable. So as long as the apartment you're proposing has 800 square feet or more, you wouldn't need a variance, but if it's under that amount, then you also have to apply for that variance.
All right, and just to make life easy for all of us, how would I go about just confirming that? Would that be through the survey, or would that be through Susan?
The architect has to calculate out the space and tell you what the proposed square footage is.
And livable is all interior, correct?
Correct.
All right, just making sure. Okay, so again, based on that, I am not able to answer that question tonight at this time. I don't know where that leaves us, but what about the other two? Maybe we can get through those.
The alleged hardship relating to the property in question is unique and does not apply to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood.
And again, I believe that it's unique, but I can't answer that because I am not familiar with the neighborhood and the surrounding areas.
Well, would that include he's in a two-family zone district, correct? Well, the hardship would be it's been turned into a three-family house that he can't use.
Go 3 camp.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that,
I agree.
Yeah,
with
it's,
Mr. Griffin.
it's a hardship, he can't use what he purchased, but
Yeah, what
he can't
purchased.
use
That's
what
what
he.
he purchased.
Yeah,
Right.
or what he believed he purchased.
Yeah,
but, okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm not gonna.
I mean, that's my interpretation.
Well, it's either that or he has to completely redo the inside of the
Yeah.
garage space to turn it back into a commercial garage that he can only use.
It can't be a commercial garage.
Which you can't even rent out.
Yeah.
And my understanding is it would have to only go to one of the people that don't live in there. It couldn't be a third party.
You would have one big apartment and one small one.
But can that first floor space be used for something, for some other use permitted in the T zone?
You can, I think you can only, the only thing permitted there would be a
Garage.
single-family
A single
home, a
home.
two-family home. If it was a garage, obviously it would be allowed to be used as a parking space for one of the two apartments.
Or storage
Or
that's
storage.
accessory to the two apartments?
And the other option was, that we also discussed, was if you weren't gonna be able to make an apartment, you could keep it as a two-family home, which would make it conforming to the use, but you would be allowed to expand the size of the apartment on the first floor by putting in an interior staircase and just
make it a
adding
duplex.
additional living space,
And
which
then
you
you
wouldn't
could rent it for
lose
more
the
money.
actual living space there. You'd have to install a staircase to connect the two
Yeah.
apartments, but then it wouldn't be 3 apartments. It would just be a larger first-floor basement apartment.
You could put the staircase where the kitchen is, because you don't need two kitchens.
No, agreed, but above that illegal current kitchen is the entrance to the front door. So, and I looked into that, in order for me to put, and actually Ms. Agostina has suggested, a spiral staircase, not even taking up a lot of space, but I had looked into that. The way the second floor, I guess, is above, because it's the first floor, I'm pulling the basement, the first floor, the walkout garage, it's above ground, so it's not a basement, but I'm calling this the first floor. The second floor right above it, in order to put a staircase, it would literally have to be like in the middle of the kitchen, or in the middle of, one of the bedrooms, and I'm sure with money, you can hire engineers and you can move all kinds of things, but then I believe the undertaking would be just too tremendous to take that for a little return, because at the end of the day, I'm not gonna be able to rent, the first floor and the second floor for $3,500, let's say. I'm only gonna get a minimal, very minimal return for a huge expenditure, so I didn't think that that was the way to go, and that's why I'm here. I figured I would try this approach. And I'm sorry, is that good, or?
And then the last one
last
is
one is-
altering the essential character of the neighborhood, if it's granted.
Yeah, and again, if it was granted, I believe it'll just make it look better. Instead of a garage door, you got a nice big bay window and some flowers, and
Well,
that's it.
I think the issue of whether or not the proposed apartment complies with the T-zone
Square
bulk
footage.
requirement
Yeah.
is kind of an
I
issue
think we ought to know that.
before you
We're
can
gonna
act.
have to.
Yeah, and then again, I'll be happy, I don't know that, so again, I apologize, my architect was not able to make it here, she would have been able to answer that. But I could have her, I guess she would submit something in writing, or would I have to come back, or how would that work?
No, you're gonna have to come back.
Yeah, we're gonna have to adjourn this till next month.
Yeah.
Understood.
And you'll
Yeah.
get the information that we talked about.
Right. So
Yeah.
you know what you need, the square footage, and this last, what was the last thing you said?
I believe that was it, right?
Uh,
Square footage, just make sure that we have 800 square feet
Susan,
minimum of living
Livable.
space.
yeah.
Is that the only other issue?
If you think that he needs to provide more information on any of those factors, then
No.
tell him.
No.
No,
Okay,
just-
fine.
So, do we make a motion to adjourn to next month?
Yes.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn this to next month, so you can get that information.
Just so that if it's under the 800 square feet,
Then
then you
they
would have
have
to
to
add
amend
that to the application,
the
requesting the
application.
variance.
Like the gentleman before, they added that parking onto it, so I would,
Yes.
well, would I do a separate application just for that, or just
No.
like a one page, I would like to amend my
One
application?
page, but
Yes.
Right.
that would just be, as many pages as you need.
I'm gonna bring 7 people with me next time too.
Use small print.
Thank you.
Understood. Thank you very much for your
Motion
time.
adjourned to next month?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Second?
We
He
did.
seconded it.
Second, we did do it?
All in favor?
Aye.
Good.
And I would just submit that one page as if I was doing a brand new application within the next week, send it to Ms. Kane, is that, or just,
You do
I
have to-
don't just show up next
No,
next
no,
month,
no,
just.
no.
Okay.
There's a revision deadline.
What we're doing
Okay.
is adjourning this.
Yeah.
Understood, okay. And I would just like to give Ms. Kane an original copy of my mailing with the affidavit and the seal for the notary. Thank you very much.
Thank
you
you.
for your time.
Thank you.
That comes back next month. Now we got
ZBA 071T10 Marble Place?
Well, first we gotta make sure he has all his marbles.
You have
10, at least 10.
At least 10.
So just before you begin on this one, so you understand, the 10 Marble is actually variances, but it's proposed for a subdivision. So some of the variants apply to what we put on the sheet as Lot 1 and Lot 2 because they're not essentially yet separate SPRs.
They're not really lots yet.
They're not
They're
approved
littles.
lots, they'd have to get a variances, so some of them, which JB's gonna propose, they're gonna apply to one lot and some.
Okay. One perspective lot and another perspective lot.
Right.
They're not lots yet.
Good evening, JB Hernandez, architect for the project. The site here is 10 Marble Place. It's adjacent to, thank you. It's adjacent to Dale Cemetery, and this is a property, it's about 12,600 square feet. In this property it's already existing non-conforming property, it has 2 structures on it. There's the original house in the front, which is a 2-family house, and in the rear, there used to be a 1-family, it is a 1-family house that it used to be, I believe, was the stone cutter's place to work in the past, and it became a 1-family. When the Scopes took over the property, my clients, what we're facing here is a property, it was 1 lot with 2 residences and 2 separate entities, so we're proposing in the subdivision is to create 2 lots with 1 structure on it to reduce the non-conformity. But due to the location of the lot and to the proximity of the 2 structures, that brings us to in front of the board because it will require us several variances that we're gonna have. What I want to point out to the board is that, I don't know if you can see on the picture. There you go. That picture actually shows well, right now the curb cut of the parking area is very wide. We are proposing to reduce the curb cut. Right now it's about 39 feet, almost 40. We're reducing the curb cut to 19 feet. Also, right now the asphalt continues into the neighbor's property. And when we're in front of the planning board, the neighbors did show concern that there may be some water issues between the 2 properties. So we have gone and reduced the amount of pavement. We have a 4-foot buffer between the parking area and the adjacent properties. So there is no longer a connection between 2 properties through asphalt pavement to eliminate any water issues. Also, at the beginning, this process has gone a few times through the planning board and its consultant. We will have to get an easement or a lease agreement from the village board because of when the property came into place and the location of the property line, there is a substantial portion of the driveway that is outside the property line. So, and it's also, there's a slate patio within like a frame arbor above. It's not on our property, but the client is willing to take it down if that's what the village requires. Again, so we have lot 1 and lot 2. In order to make these 2 lot works, again, we're going to require a total of 9 variances. They all have to do with bulk regulations. we have 12,600 square feet, so once we divided the two lots, we will require the lot area variances, and also we will require the side yard and rear yard, and because we have a shared driveway, we also will require we close them 4 feet to the property line. At one point, we had proposed 2 separate driveways, but that was created, it was coming too close to the old cemetery and the St. Kilbrook, so we opted to have a shared driveway. We do have the adequate parking, and we're not proposing any changes to the residences. They all have certificate of occupancy for 1 and the 2 family. So all the work that we are proposing, again, is on the site, in this subdivision. And we are reducing the amount of impervious area. So, now, if the board has any questions.
Yeah. Maybe you can just kind of state, go over what variances that you need for each
Sure.
lot.
At the bottom of the sheet that we have the list of variances, we will require a lot area variance for each lot. One for 1,867 square feet, one for 510. And as you see, we have 2 different symbols on the variances. The ones with the squares is actually the ones that are being created by the subdivision. The other one is existing non-conforming, that it doesn't matter if we do the subdivision or not, will still be there. Those become in the minimum front yard, the 1 side yard, and the impervious coverage. Again, the impervious coverage we are reducing by removing some of the asphalt that is currently at the property.
So there's gonna be less impervious.
Yes.
Less impervious. You're not making any new structures.
No.
All you're doing is
Making 2 lots.
making
Making
2 lots
lots.
out of 1 lot. That's
Yes.
it.
Yes.
1 lot to 2 lots.
1 lot to do
Yeah.
it.
There are 2, right now, the lot is legally as one parcel with 2
Buildings.
separate
Right.
residences on it, so they want to separate, to make 2 separate parcels from each building.
Right. Is there any legal reason why we would not want to make these 2 houses into 2 separate parcels?
Well, I don't think that, I think the subdivision issue is separate here. I think you should just focus on the area variance criteria in the code.
Well, the area variance is what, if we give him that, that's what would allow him to make a subdivision.
True. Yeah, it's kind of sticky, but,
So,
It will allow us to proceed with the subdivision.
It would allow them to
You-
proceed,
the
but
planning
proceed
board-
to the planning board.
Planning board.
To
still,
ask
them.
them.
It doesn't guarantee it.
It doesn't
Right.
guarantee.
It just, we move it, it moves that direction now, moves it
True.
to
Yes.
planning.
Right.
So is there any reason that would be an impediment for us to allow him to move this to the next level?
I think you really, all you need to do is go through
decide.
the area variance criteria
Okay.
and decide based on those 5 criteria.
So what are you looking to do by subdividing?
Well, they will have 2 different tax lots, and in the future, if they decide to sell one of them or do anything with the 2 lots, they will have right now 2 separate tax lots.
So it's for the flexibility of running your business. It allows you to sell one and not the other. Right now, if you sell one building, you're selling both buildings.
Right.
So this just makes it more flexible.
More flexible, and it's also, right now you have we see it as having a bigger non-conformity. We're reducing the non-conformity of the property. And as I point out, of those 9 variances, only 4 of them are required by the subdivision. The other ones, they're all not, existing, the proximity to the lot.
Yeah.
It's already there.
Yeah, it's already there.
So one of the buildings, I believe, is a 2-family, and one is a
Single
single
family.
family.
Yeah, 2
So,
family.
so for the parking provided,
We
yeah.
have the, on lot 2, which is the 2-family, lot 2, we have 4 parking spaces, and we do have 2 parking spaces for lot 1.
Okay.
So the single-family home has 2 spaces, and the rest are for the 2-family?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were going over the worksheet, I think there's just one thing missing. One of the lots, I think lot 1, it said that the requirement was 75 feet width, and you proposed 55.91. So that should get an additional variance for 19 point.
Which lot 1?
Lot 1, you actually wrote it in, but under the variances needed, you left out the.
Okay, so
out
there will
there.
be an additional variance.
Yeah, you're right.
And I believe also, I think we discussed, I guess lot 2 is showing because the parking spaces are technically a front yard, that's part of the variance.
We
for that.
amended to ask for a 0, because we're already asking for proximity.
Because that would be parking in the front yard, because the parking is proposed in front of the building.
Then we changed that, I thought we changed that.
Um, That's why I said to go over each variance,
Yeah.
to make sure they're all covered for what you're proposing, so if there's anything missing, you can correct it.
Was driveway within 4 feet of the property line, and it will be parking in the front yard as well. But that's, because we're not changing that, we're not proposing, it's existing. I mean, do we still need a variance in that case? There's no proposed, there's an existing
I
parking.
would say that even if it's existing, we should, because you're separating and making 2
Okay.
lots. we should just go-
Yeah, so then,
So therefore, it
Yeah.
becomes a new lot.
You gotta add the
So you
zero
need
parking
to-
variance, yeah.
Yeah.
I get that, that makes sense.
so then I will have to amend,
Is this
request to
something that
amend
should
that
be
to
amended and brought
include
up next month?
Are we talking about, which one are we talking about, I'm sorry?
lot 2.
So under lot 2, the proposed parking for the driveway and all is parking in the front yard.
Okay.
So that, the code says that in the residential districts, you can't provide parking in the front yard. So
Okay.
they would have to request for that variance for that lot.
That existing, because they're not making more parking.
No, we
Right.
actually,
No, but they're
Right, it's just
changing.
Yeah, I get it, yeah, I understand, okay. So you gotta add that variance.
2
Okay.
additional variances, right?
So with these changes, does this need to be submitted again for the changes? Or can we
Well,
do?
Can we just make
can
the
we
change?
amend
I
that?
don't know, I'm asking the lawyer.
Because we amended, I will be requesting to amend the lot width
Mhm.
on lot 1 to variance of 19.09 and to
Because-
allow for the existing,
But what we asked
Parking in
for
the front yard.
is different than what he needs.
Needs.
Yes,
Right.
yeah,
I think
so
I think it has to be sent next month, I'm sorry.
we can't,
Because we have to get the clarity in there, and in the writing, I think, and unless the attorney says it's just not necessary.
I think that it probably should be shown on the plans. And if you wanna see that on the plans before you,
I do,
adopt.
yes.
okay, well, then we should,
And that way, everything's clear, and we don't have a problem, and you don't have a problem, so we're really solving your problem
so you don't have to come
by
back
getting
here.
it, the clarity here, I think, anyway.
Yeah, okay.
Understand?
Because this way, you would say, well, we can't approve it, because it's not in there, and you've got other things, and it's still out of whack.
okay.
So if you come back with
Come back with it all straightened out and.
with the changes.
It does say
It'll be a
front
lot
yard,
easier.
I mean, it does say front yard on the,
With all the things we talked about, you know.
What
So
are you
the-
referring to?
So the one area
It says-
variance,
front setback 30 feet.
The front yard parking, those kind of things. Get it all cleared up so that it doesn't bite you, you know.
just
later.
show, like, I guess, basically we're asking that you show on your plans where the parking is.
It
And-
is shown, that is shown, the parking is shown.
This,
Right, I know, but with, and
And showing-
requesting the
Front yard
front yard
variance.
variance.
Yeah, making it very clear.
Yeah,
And that way,
there'll be no question.
we
Yeah.
agree.
So do you wanna make a motion?
I make a motion to propose till next month, with the clarity.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. So I'm sorry that it's taken another month, but this will be better for you down the road.
Yeah.
Better to get it right.
It'll take away any problems you might have in the future.
Right.
Which could cost a lot more.
So you have to
Thank you.
Right, early now, so we did marble.
So, we are done,
We gotta approve last month's minutes.
Just have a question about this, I know you guys closed it, like, I have a neighbor next door, and this used to be Annabella Goncalves, so I live on 8.5, which is, you know, where you see those two cars on top, that's where my driveway is. This used to be 3 houses together. When I bought my house, the owners did what they are doing now, they divided. So my water, because it was all together, is going towards this driveway down. They still connected the driveways. So that's what I'm concerned. So by what I understood, it's gonna be curveless, but what is he doing, where is my water gonna go?
I think that was addressed
That was
as
addressed.
part of the planning board.
Yeah.
right, from the
That's
planning
why
board.
they left the 4-foot space, and I think they made provisions to accommodate that.
Yeah.
Well,
But that was
please.
addressed in the planning
The
board.
planning board only had like a preliminary review of this application. It will go back to the planning board after this process is over to really fully vet the site plan and the subdivision. And they can fully, hear you out in terms of any source of stormwater issues you have. So this board not really be the place to talk about stormwater issues.
Well, I did call them and I get no answers, and I came to the town, got no answers. So I came to the meeting to find out what is he doing towards the water.
So,
When it's proposed for a subdivision in front of the planning board, it gets reviewed by the consulting engineers for that, which deal with also the stormwater issues.
yes.
So I believe the engineers for the village actually had conversation with the architect who's on this project, and he had altered some of the proposal to accommodate that. But if you have additional
No,
concerns
but
with
what
that.
did he, that's what I didn't understand. He
Oh,
took
okay,
what, the
so
curve
this-
out and what
No,
else?
If I may.
Yeah.
Maybe
We
this
took
is
a
a
away,
discussion that they should have.
It's all right.
It's okay.
we took a strip out of, and I was contacted by Keller and Sessions. They called me, they said I spoke with you.
Okay, yeah, I did call them, yes.
Yes, so,
Never
yeah.
heard that.
So what we did is we took 4 feet of pavement between the 2 properties. So now, nothing from this driveway will go into your driveway.
Right, but I'm not concerned from your driveway. It's my water goes into your driveway and then it's gonna sit on the lawn and I'm gonna have a puddle. That's where I'm concerned, because there used to be 3 houses and the old owner let the water go when they divided. He didn't care if my water was going down his driveway. But now if you're cutting it, my water's gonna sit in that piece of
Well,
grass. There's
usually
nothing to drain my water.
Right now, the water will go through the driveways.
Through the
Now we're creating a buffer, a piece of, an area where the water from your driveway will hopefully seep in.
We'll shoot down still.
It's like,
I'm like, I don't understand what that
From
is.
the trees, there's trees and bushes, there's a buffer, so it'll absorb the water versus puddling, if that
Right.
makes sense. So you won't have asphalt, you won't have concrete, you won't have a driveway that it'll go into the ground and it'll seep in, so you won't get a puddle.
Instead of pooling.
Instead of pooling. There's no pooling because it'll absolutely be absorbed by the earth.
It'll be less road, more soft soil.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
That's
that makes sense?
If that works, I don't know. I'm just
It
question that
As
out.
opposed to the plan, and again, I think that's a.
Because the old days, they did it that way, and that's why,
Right,
for me to go and
what
dig
he's
now
sa-
and
what
put
he's
the
saying
water
to
out.
us tonight, and what he's saying by his plans, is he's taking up that driveway, okay, where the
The
water would
piece,
run
okay.
down, and putting in dirt.
Right.
Okay, and that makes so that there is no pooling.
Which you-
All right,
which
so
you-
that should be, so that should cover
Should be
your
better.
issue.
What
It should be
you
better.
can do is, because it was reviewed by Kellogg Sessions, who's a consulting engineer, I believe whatever documentation to the approval that they gave them by doing this, that you can get copies of that if you want to read that.
And I'm not even sure that they've done a full review yet.
But obviously
They
it'll be at
will.
the end when it becomes.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So So did we actually take a motion to adjourn that? 'Cause
Yeah.
I
Did
wasn't
we
here.
approve the minutes?
Yes, we
No, we
did.
gotta
Oh,
approve the
okay.
minutes.
Oh, wow, okay.
So, right?
Yes, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from
Last
the
meeting.
February 11th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, yeah, February 11th, 2020 meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Now, motion to adjourn.
Can I get a motion to close this meeting?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're done.
Motion carried.
Nice job.